Welcome to another engaging episode of The Goldsmith. Today we're going to fabricate a decorative basket setting for a large emerald cut emerald out of 18 karat yellow gold. I hope you enjoy watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. To begin, we mill our stock and draw our wire. The next thing we'll do is fabricate the base of our basket setting. We mark a point on our stock several millimeters from the end. I like to start so that the final joint will occur on one of the lateral sides of the setting. If you prefer, some people like to begin and end at a corner. That's okay, but I find I have more control over the precision of the fit when my final joint is in the middle of a side. Once we've marked a point, we can run a saw blade across the face of the stock a few times to produce a small groove. We'll shape that groove with a needle file. This technique will come in handy for all types of shapes, and if we do it right, we'll end up with a rectangle that's virtually seamless. So we file out the groove to a 90-degree shape and to a depth that's a little more than half the thickness of our stock. Two important notes here. One, we're working with metal that's been annealed to a dead soft state. This can be done with a smithy, but a more precise temperature control, therefore a more thoroughly annealed piece, can be achieved in an induction melter. 2. As with all our fabrications, some connections will be fused and some will be soldered, but never do we use anything less than 18 karat yellow hard solder. Those two facts come into play as we take our flat nose pliers and start to bend our first corner. As we do, and you won't be able to see it here, pay close attention to the outside of the corner. You will notice the stress in the metal as the groove closes in on itself. If our groove is not deep enough or our metal is not thoroughly annealed, a jagged crack will begin to appear on the outside of the corner. If we're on target, as we approach a 90-degree angle, we will notice a very slight orange peel texture on that outside corner. This is stress buildup in the crystalline structure of the metal. If we've done everything correctly so far, we could, theoretically, straighten the piece back out without breaking, but we're not going to gamble. We're going to flow the closed channel with solder as the heat from our smithy simultaneously anneals the stress from our bend. After we've repeated this a couple of times, notice the last corner is not bent plumb and flown yet. We mark our stock and trim it to fit. Instead of filing those ends flat, try closing but not yet flowing the joint. Then run a small saw blade through it. Repeat this a time or two if need be to hone the dimensions to a perfect rectangle. Once the base is formed, we file a little bit of an angle off each corner. This provides us a smooth surface to which we will attach our prong stock. We begin that process by adding a small melt of solder to the tip of the stock. We put it on the tip and not the face, so that as we hold the stock to the base, we can feel when it lays completely flush. Heating from the inside of the base, we pull the solder through the flush surface-to-surface fitting. Don't put an immense amount of effort into measuring the prong length here. Later, when it's important, we'll measure and mark uniformly from the bottom of the base. Now, with our double round chain nose pliers, we can put a little shape into the prongs. This not only draws in the prongs to fit the stone, but also yields a pleasant curvature to the overall shape. after filing the bulk of the excess off the bottom of the prongs and truing the base across a little sandpaper to achieve a uniform flatness, we make a mark a few millimeters up each prong. Again, we cut across the stock at the mark about the depth of our saw blade and widen it a little with the needle file. Then this time we shape the groove with a crouse burr to achieve a half-round groove that's not quite as deep as the burr. Again, preferring to make that final joint on a side, we melt a little solder a few millimeters down a piece of wire, not on the tip. It's absolutely critical at this point that we pay extremely close attention to the placement of our flame and the temperatures of both the prong tip and the tip of the wire. A few more of the same type of attachment, and we can trim and fit the final joint of the wire. It only takes a tiny bit of metal to flow between and bond an end-to-end joint in this size wire, so the less solder you use, the less you'll have to clean away. Having finished the basket setting, we've constructed a larger rectangular frame from the same stock as the base in the exact same way. We'll mount the basket into the frame. This will give us a solid point of attachment for a split bail large enough to wear on a decent sized rope or even a smaller omega. It will also create some little hollows and voids that'll be perfectly suited for some simple yet effective wire ornamentation. The easiest way to find the center of each side is to eyeball the center with your dividers, then mark from both ends. The marks will either be right on top of each other or close enough to easily judge the distance between them. Encourage a little pilot divot with the scribe and drill a hole in the center of each side. This next type of attachment is one I think you'll find useful in many different applications. We've taken a piece of wire and melted the ends slightly into a ball. That wire is then fed through the hole in the frame. What we're going to do is superheat that little ball end and not the frame. The angle of approach with a strong but tight flame allows us to heat the ball not only until it melts, but also we want the wire inside the frame beneath the melted ball to collapse. When this happens, the metal flows into the frame as well as onto the surface, creating a perfectly fused attachment as though it were the same piece of metal. In effect, it is. It's as though it had been cast that way, but with the more favorable qualities and uniform crystalline structure of milled metal. In much the same way we mounted the wire to the prongs, we grooved the base of the basket and used the crouse burr to shape it. A few minor tweaks will be necessary to fit and shape everything to plumb. We could fuse these attachments, but we won't because we face the problem of directing heat away from metal that represents a lot of work. A hard solder attachment will suffice here. Next, we'll add a little flare on top. This will help us keep the bale higher than the stone and give us more room to decorate. A bale is formed from the same stock as the base and frame. It's been attached to the top of the flare, then split with the saw, and bent back down to the frame where it is finally attached. Now it's time for some hand-wrought accent. If you're careful, you can melt the tip of the wire so that it balls up fairly evenly around the circumference of the wire. Then with the double round chain nose, we make a bend one way, then the other to form a little curly S shape. Snip the wire and melt to a ball. Snugging that little S between your parallel pliers will let you fit it between the base and the round wire above so that enough tension remains to keep the piece kinda stuck in there, even under heat. This will lead to a couple of relatively basic solder joints to install it. In similar fashion, we add some little curly cues between the frame and the basket base. We talked earlier about annealing with the induction melter rather than with the torch. This makes a big difference when working with lengthy pieces of wire. The dead soft state required is just very difficult to achieve with a torch evenly. Fusing a piece through the frame, we proceed to wrap it in a precise pattern between the frame and the basket wire, closing it through the frame with another fuse. The flare on top also has some room which will lend itself to a little thread and fuse too. And with that, we bring the fabrication end of the project to completion. We've made a sturdy foundation, we've executed several tricky attachments, and we've garnished the entire structure with delicate wire, but there's still much left to do. A thorough polish cannot be overemphasized. Our end result will benefit from patience and perseverance through the bench polish. Now, let's set this stone and make a piece of jewelry out of it. I don't usually get much footage of the actual securing of the stone because I've found that I tend to move the piece around a lot, and as I do on my own camera work, it's kind of hard to tend the camera and the set. Also, setting gemstones, especially softer ones, and especially in substantial prongage, I just don't like to pay attention to anything else. I will, however, focus on some detailed setting techniques in a later video. Having finally made it to the buffer, we draw near the end of another episode of The Goldsmith. Our piece of jewelry art complete, our customer elated, our work is done. I hope you've enjoyed taking this little journey with me as much as I've enjoyed having you along. Be sure and check out our website, www.thegoldsmith.webs.com. Type directly into the address bar, not the search engine. Be on the lookout for our upcoming mini episodes featuring full picture demonstrations in a quicker format. And please join us again. I look forward to fabricating something special with you next time on The Goldsmith.